History 1. It was my first year of college, and I had gone off to Nebraska for school. It was my first time being away from home, not knowing anyone except my ex, who had also decided to attend the same university. Our school had the football players move in earlier than the rest of the freshmen and transfers, so they were around to help people move into dorms. One of the players helped my family while my mom, my aunt, and I went to the financial aid office to sign some paperwork. Once classes began, I was a music major focusing on vocal performance. My schedule was tight, and I barely had time to eat. This detail will be relevant later. A classmate was taking up some of my voice lesson time with the teacher, so I told him I'd bring the homework to the cafeteria after my lessons. We exchanged social media contacts so I could let him know when to meet. I didn't give out my number to strangers. After my lessons, I ran home to change into some sweats before dinner. At dinner, I met up with the classmate in the cafeteria, gave him the homework, and we parted ways. I ate and then went back to my room to do homework. My roommate was at a study group, so she wasn't home. About 5 minutes after I got back, the classmate messaged me on Snapchat, asking for help with the homework. I told him to send his questions via Snapchat, and I'd help him that way. He insisted on coming to my room, and even though I protested, he eventually stopped messaging. I assumed he was over it. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. He showed up at my dorm even though I never told him my room number. He pushed his way in, and I agreed to help him with the homework but told him he had to leave afterward. He said okay, and we set up at my desk. I sat as far away from him as possible while still being able to help him. After a few minutes, he put his hand on my thigh. I asked him to remove it or leave. He removed his hand but put it back a few minutes later. I stood up to walk away, but he grabbed my wrist and pinned me on my bed, which was right next to the desk. He then raped me. After he was done, he grabbed his stuff and said he was ready to go. I walked him out because I thought I'd get in trouble if I didn't, as it was after hours and we had to escort people around the building. As he was leaving, he said it was great for him. I went back to my room and just laid there, staring at the towels on the floor while crying. My roommate got home, and I tried to tell her what happened, but she didn't care enough to stay awake and listen. The next day, I woke up late for class and didn't get to shower, which is important because showering can wash away evidence. I rushed to get ready and went to class. I had this class with him again, so I sat on the opposite side of the room. Halfway through, he messaged me on Snapchat, and I lost it. I grabbed my stuff and ran out of the room. A friend convinced me to go to the dean. The dean was helpful at first, but then he told me I was trying to ruin the guy's life and football career, even though he raped me. They said they'd have to call my mom, and I panicked because I hadn't told her yet. I called my mom, and she convinced me to go to the hospital since I hadn't showered yet. At the hospital, my roommate came with me. The rape kit showed trauma in the lower region of my body and an allergic reaction to latex. My roommate stayed with me until the cops came. Male officers entered my room while I was having the vaginal exam. They asked me what I was wearing and what I did to provoke him, which made me start crying and shut down. The doctor, already upset that male cops were sent in, told them to leave. My roommate left with the cops to gather the sweats I was wearing during the assault. When I got back to campus that night, I moved dorms. The next morning, I went to the dean with my roommate and asked for an order of protection. They gave it to me but took me out of my classes while they investigated. The attacker found out where my new room was because he was entering the building and made friends with the girl across the hall. I came home to messages on my door's dry erase board calling me a liar and worse. I had my first suicide attempt after 6 years clean of self-harm. My partner, who was just a friend then, sat outside my room until I let him in, bringing my favorite snacks and flowers. I moved again to a more closed-off area. Only my partner and close friends knew where my new room was. The police took both my clothes and his, and the condom he kept as a trophy, but still dropped the charges due to insufficient evidence. The school's investigation was worse, ruining my life more than his. I had to drop the investigation because it was affecting my academics. He stalked me, taking videos and pictures of me and sending them to my professors, claiming I was lying. They asked if I could get over it if he apologized. He found out where my new room was again and tried to get me in trouble with the RAs, who searched my room at 4 a.m. one night while hanging out with friends. I got a text and a snap from my old roommate showing a video of her and my rapist having sex. I took it to the dean, but they wouldn't reopen the case. I blocked out everyone I knew from before. The rest of the school year went okay, and I took time off to attend community college before enrolling in another university. I don't want anyone to see me as a victim. I'm healing now, and still with the same guy after 7 years. We're getting married in October 2025, and IVDJ TMM about to graduate with a BA in English. Many good things have happened to help my healing process. I had trauma before this because of my abusive father, but that's a story for another day. I hope my story shows that you can heal from trauma. History 2. I was hanging out with my roommate David, who's also my best friend, and we decided to go for a late-night walk. We walked from my house into the woods about 4 blocks away. It was around midnight when we arrived and ventured about a mile into the woods. There, we stumbled upon an abandoned building with no windows and no doors. Our curiosity got the best of us, so we decided to go inside and look around. Once inside, we took out our phones and turned on our flashlights to see where we were going. Here's where it gets terrifying. As we shined our flashlights around, we saw big capital letters in black spray paint on the walls, saying things like VDJNG, LLP, MEVDKJ, and VDJNJ, get me out of here. DJKJ. There were also pentagrams and messages like VDJNG, get out. DJKJ. David and I were freaking out, but we decided to explore further and went into another room down the hallway. As soon as we entered, we were hit with an incredibly awful odor that made us gag and nearly vomit. Shining our flashlights around, we saw a message on the wall that read, VDJNJI warned you, DJKJ, in big capital letters. Then we shined the light on the floor, and what we saw made us scream. There was a woman's body lying on the floor, drenched in blood with multiple stab wounds. She looked to be in her late 40s. We assumed the terrible smell came from her body. Both of us screamed so loudly that it echoed throughout the entire building, and it felt like our vocal cords were going to give out. The sight of the body made me so sick that I threw up hard, feeling like I was vomiting my guts out. The shock was so intense that I literally soiled my pants. David also threw up from the sight and smell of the body. After we were done, we ran out of there and called 911. The police and paramedics arrived about 10 minutes later. We told them everything, and they took the woman away in a body bag. We gave our contact information to the police for updates, and then they left. David and I walked back to our house, covered in our own vomit and other unpleasant things. The sight of the dead body really freaked us out. When we got home, we went straight to our bathrooms and showered to get rid of the stink. We discarded our soiled clothes and didn't sleep for 2 nights. That night left us both traumatized and scared to walk outside at night. The next day, the police called us with an update. They told us the woman had been stabbed 17 times, 9 times in the chest, and 8 times in the stomach. They found her killer, who turned out to be her ex-boyfriend. He was arrested for murdering her because she had dumped him for another man. About a year later, we found out he was sentenced to life in prison. David and I can still remember the disturbing image of the woman, and it gives us nightmares to this day. That night will forever scar us. History 3. My name is Tom, and this happened to me in 2005. I don't remember the exact month, but it was before my birthday in October. I was 35 at the time. I was living in a small town in Texas with my wife Jenny and our 2 kids. Jenny and I had been married for 10 years, and I thought we were happy. One day, I decided to leave work early and surprise Jenny. I figured we'd go out for dinner, maybe have a nice evening together. When I got home, I noticed a strange car in the driveway. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a friend had come over. But when I walked into the house, I heard voices coming from upstairs. My heart started pounding in my chest. I crept up the stairs and followed the voices to our bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I saw Jenny with another man. They were laughing and talking, and then they started kissing. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I backed away quietly and left the house. I drove around for a while, trying to process what I'd just seen. My mind was racing and I felt sick to my stomach. I ended up at my friend Steve's house. Steve and I had been friends since high school, and he was the kind of guy you could always count on. I told him what happened, and he listened patiently. He didn't say much, just let me talk. After a while, he offered me a beer, and we sat on his porch, drinking in silence. The next day, I confronted Jenny. She didn't deny it. She said she was sorry, but it had just happened. She didn't know why. I asked her how long it had been going on, and she said a few months. That was like a punch to the gut. All those nights I thought she was working late or out with friends, she'd been with him. We argued for hours. She cried and I yelled. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. I couldn't believe the woman I loved could do this to me. Eventually, I told her I needed some time to think, and left the house again. I spent the next few days at Steve's place, trying to figure out what to do. He kept telling me I had to decide if I could forgive her and move on, or if it was over. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. In the end, I decided to leave. I couldn't stay in the same house where everything reminded me of her betrayal. I found a small apartment on the other side of town and moved out. It was hard, especially because of the kids. I wanted to be there for them, but I couldn't stay with Jenny. Divorce was tough, but it was the right decision. Over time, I started to heal. I focused on my job, spent time with my kids, and leaned on my friends. It took a while, but eventually I began to feel like myself again. Looking back, it was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. But it taught me a lot about myself. I learned that I could survive, even when it felt like my world was falling apart. And I learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away, even when it hurts.